The morning sun was filtering through my kitchen blinds when I heard the knock. Not a polite tap-tap, but the kind of aggressive pounding that makes your coffee mug rattle. I opened the door to find 3 men in mismatched police uniforms standing on my porch, badges that looked like they came from a costume shop pinned to their chests. Behind them, arms crossed and wearing that smug smile I'd grown to hate, stood Nancy, the self-proclaimed HOA president who'd been making my life hell for months. "You're under arrest for HOA violations," the tallest fake cop announced, waving some official-looking papers. "We have a warrant." Nancy's grin widened. She thought this was checkmate. She thought she was about to watch me get dragged off my own property in handcuffs. She had no idea that the real squad cars pulling up behind them were mine. And what happened next wouldn't just expose her elaborate scam, it would bring down an entire criminal network. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because this story gets wild. There's nothing quite like the feeling of buying your first house. After 20 years of apartment living, dealing with landlords who treated deposits like free money, I finally had my own place. A modest 2-story colonial on Maple Street, complete with a white picket fence and a garage that actually fit my car. I thought I'd found paradise. Was wrong. The moving truck had barely pulled away when I noticed her. Nancy Peterson stood on her front porch across the street, clipboard clutched to her chest like armor. She was maybe 55, with that aggressive blonde bob that screams, "I want to speak to your manager." Her eyes swept over my house with the intensity of a building inspector, and I could practically see her mental notepad filling up with violations. I gave her a friendly wave. New neighborhood, new neighbors, why not start off on the right foot? She didn't wave back. She just stared, her mouth twisted into what looked like permanent disapproval. That should have been my first red flag. The second came the next morning. I stepped outside to grab my newspaper and nearly tripped over a bright orange violation notice duct taped to my front door. I peeled it off, squinting in the morning light. Immediate HOA violation, correction. Required, the list was ridiculous. Mailbox color, non-compliant with community standards. Unauthorized lawn ornament, apparently my welcome mat counted as decor. Failure to register with Maple Street Homeowners Association. I read it twice, then burst out laughing. I'd done my homework before buying this house. There was no HOA. I'd specifically avoided neighborhoods with associations because I'd heard too many horror stories about power-hungry board members making people's lives miserable. So I did what any rational person would do. I crumpled up the notice and tossed it in my kitchen trash. Big mistake. That afternoon, I was in my garage organizing tools when I heard the click, click, click of heels on concrete. I turned to see Nancy marching up my driveway, clipboard in one hand, cell phone in the other. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I trust you received our notice?" I wiped grease off my hands with a rag. "Yeah, I threw it away." Her left eye twitched. "That wasn't a suggestion, Mr. Thompson. Here's the thing, Nancy, can I call you Nancy?" I didn't wait for an answer. "I never signed up for any HOA. Matter of fact, there is no HOA on this street." Nancy's smile turned predatory. "Your property was voted into our association last year. You are absolutely a member." I let out a short laugh. "You can't just vote people into an HOA. That's not how property law works." She shrugged like we were discussing the weather. "We already have. Show me the paperwork. I don't need to show you anything. You will comply with our community standards, or we will escalate this matter." I took a step closer, keeping my voice level. "Escalate to who?" Nancy lifted her chin, trying to look intimidating despite being a foot shorter than me. "The proper authorities." I stared at her for a long moment, then shrugged. "Go ahead." That wasn't the response she'd expected. Nancy's confident mask slipped for just a second, revealing something ugly underneath. She spun on her heel and stormed back across the street, but not before shooting me a look that could have melted steel. An hour later, I found 3 more violation notices zip-tied to my fence. The next morning, my mailbox was stuffed with HOA warnings about everything from my non-regulation, house numbers, to the unapproved color of my garden hose. I threw them all away. But that night, my security cameras caught something interesting. Nancy, flashlight in hand, creeping around my property at 11 p.m., taking pictures of my house from every angle. She wasn't just harassing me, she was building a case. That's when I knew this was going to get ugly. Nancy wasn't just persistent. She was relentless. Over the next 2 weeks, the violations kept coming. My doormat was the wrong size. My car was parked incorrectly in my own driveway. My porch light was apparently casting disruptive shadows on the sidewalk. Each notice came with escalating fines. $50, $100, $250. I ignored them all, but Nancy was just getting started. One morning, I stepped outside to find 2 men in bright yellow safety vests standing in my front yard, measuring the distance between my mailbox and the curb with a surveyor's tape. "Can I help you?" I called out. The taller one barely looked up. "Routine HOA inspection, sir." I walked over, arms crossed. "You're on private property." "I need you to leave," the shorter man smirked. "Not according to HOA records. This is community property for compliance purposes." Sigh. That's when I noticed the patches on their vests. Neighborhood Compliance Division. Fancy titles that meant absolutely nothing, but they wore them like badges of honor. "I'm only going to say this once," I said, my voice dropping to that tone I'd perfected during 20 years in law enforcement. "Get off my property now." The taller man shifted uncomfortably, but his partner just grinned. "You'll regret this attitude, Mr. Thompson." They left, but I knew this was far from over. That night, my power mysteriously went out. Just my house, every other home on the street had electricity. The next morning, I found my mailbox had been knocked over, and someone had keyed a long scratch down the side of my car. Called the local police to file a report. The responding officer was polite but unhelpful. "No witnesses, no evidence linking it to your HOA dispute. Not much we can do." That's when I realized Nancy wasn't just running an annoying neighborhood watch group. She was running a criminal operation, so I started investigating. I drove to the county courthouse and requested all official records for any homeowners association on Maple Street. The clerk searched for 20 minutes and came back empty-handed. "Sorry, sir. No registered HOA for that address." "You sure you have the right street?" I was sure. Nancy's Maple Street Homeowners Association didn't exist. It had never been legally formed, never been registered with the county, and had zero legal authority. But that hadn't stopped her from collecting dues, issuing fines, and threatening foreclosure. I spent the next few days knocking on doors, talking to neighbors. What I learned made my blood boil. Nancy's scam had been running for 3 years. Most homeowners, tired of the harassment and afraid of escalation, had simply paid up. Some had even sold their houses just to escape her. Mrs. Chen, an elderly widow 3 houses down, broke down crying when I asked about the HOA. She'd paid over $4,000 in bogus fines because Nancy threatened to put a lien on her house. The Martinez family had moved out last year after Nancy's compliance officers started showing up at their door every week. Nancy wasn't just a power-hungry control freak. She was a con artist, and those so-called compliance officers were her muscle. That afternoon, I marched straight to Nancy's front door and knocked hard. She opened it with her usual smug expression. "I was wondering when you'd come crawling back." I held up the documents from the courthouse. "Your HOA doesn't exist, Nancy. You're running a scam, and I have proof." She barely glanced at the papers. "That's cute. You think some clerk at City Hall knows more about community management than I do?" "This ends now," I said, taking a step forward. "No more fake fines, no more harassment, no more terrorizing my neighbors." Nancy exhaled dramatically, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You can fight this if you want, but it won't end well for you." That's when I realized we weren't alone. 4 men had appeared behind her in the hallway. The same compliance officers from earlier, plus 2 I hadn't seen before. They were bigger than the surveyors, and they weren't carrying measuring tapes. Nancy crossed her arms, her smile widening. "You might want to rethink your approach, Mr. Thompson." I wasn't the one who needed to rethink anything, because Nancy had no idea who she was trying to intimidate. Nancy thought she was running a neighborhood HOA. In reality, she was running the most sophisticated property scam I'd seen in 2 decades of police work, and she was about to learn just how badly she'd underestimated her latest target. Spent the weekend doing what I do best, investigating. I pulled property records, traced financial transactions, and built a timeline of Nancy's operation. What I found was staggering. Nancy wasn't just scamming individual homeowners. She was systematically targeting entire neighborhoods, setting up fake HOAs, and essentially stealing property through intimidation and forged documents. Some families had actually lost their homes to her. Fraudulent foreclosure proceedings. The compliance officers weren't just neighborhood toughs, they were part of an organized crew that specialized in property fraud. They'd show up at houses with fake legal documents, threaten homeowners with arrest, and pressure them into signing over deeds or paying thousands in bogus fines. But the most shocking discovery came when I traced the money. Nancy's bank records showed payments to a property management company that was flipping houses at below-market prices. Houses that had been foreclosed by her fake HOA. She wasn't just running a scam, she was stealing homes and selling them for profit. Monday morning, I made some calls. By Tuesday, I had a full task force assembled. By Wednesday, we were ready to move, but Nancy made the first move. Thursday morning, I was drinking coffee on my porch when I saw them coming. 3 black SUVs rolling down Maple Street like a presidential motorcade. They pulled into my driveway and parked in formation, engines still running. The doors opened simultaneously, and out stepped 6 men in tactical gear. Black vests, utility belts, badges that gleamed in the morning sun. They moved with military precision, flanking my front walkway like they were raiding a drug cartel. Nancy emerged from the lead vehicle, clipboard in hand, wearing a black blazer that made her look like she was heading to a funeral. Her smile was wider than I'd ever seen it. The tallest officer stepped forward, unfolding an official-looking document. "You are in violation of multiple HOA regulations," he announced in a voice that was probably meant to sound authoritative. "We have a warrant for your immediate removal from this property." Nancy clasped her hands together, practically glowing with satisfaction. "We gave you every opportunity to comply, Mr. Thompson. You chose this." I stayed seated on my porch steps, coffee mug in hand, studying the 6 men who thought they were about to arrest me. Their uniforms were good, better than the surveyor costumes, but not perfect. The badges were slightly different sizes. The patches didn't quite match. And most tellingly, they all kept glancing at Nancy for approval instead of taking charge of the situation like real officers would. The leader stepped closer. "Sir, you need to come with us." I took a slow sip of coffee. "That's an interesting warrant you've got there. Mind if I take a look?" He hesitated, then handed me the document. It was impressive work official letterhead, legal jargon, even a fake judge's signature. But it was still fake. "You know," I said, standing up slowly, "I've seen a lot of arrest warrants in my time. This isn't one of them." Nancy's smile faltered slightly. "Resisting arrest is a serious crime, Mr. Thompson." I nodded thoughtfully. "It absolutely is." "So is impersonating a police officer?" I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my badge. "I'm Chief of Police Michael Thompson, Metro PD." The silence that followed was deafening. The fake officer's face went white. Nancy's mouth fell open. 2 of the compliance officers took instinctive steps backward. "Now then," I continued, my voice taking on the authority that 20 years of real police work had given me, "I'm going to need all of you to place your hands where I can see them." That's when the real siren started wailing. Nancy thought she had checkmated me. Instead, she'd walked straight into a trap that had been 3 months in the making. 4 squad cars screamed around the corner, officers pouring out with weapons drawn. My lieutenant, Detective Reynolds, jogged up to my porch with a grin on his face. "Morning, Chief. Looks like you caught some fish." The fake officers were already on the ground, hands zip-tied behind their backs. Nancy stood frozen in my driveway, her clipboard scattered at her feet, watching her entire operation crumble in real time. "Nancy Peterson," I said, walking down my porch steps. "You're under arrest for fraud, extortion, impersonating law enforcement officials, and about a dozen other charges we'll sort out down at the station." She found her voice as Reynolds cuffed her. "This is a mistake. I run a legitimate community organization." "No," I said, holding up the fake warrant. "What you run is a criminal enterprise. And thanks to your little show here this morning, we have everything we need to shut it down permanently." One of my officers emerged from Nancy's SUV with a box of documents. "Chief, you're going to want to see this." I rifled through the papers, fake legal forms, forged property deeds, financial records showing hundreds of thousands in fraudulent collections. But at the bottom of the box was something even more interesting: correspondence with a real estate investment company that had been buying up properties at suspiciously low prices. Nancy wasn't working alone. She was part of a larger operation, and now we had the evidence to bring down the entire network. As the last of the fake officers was loaded into a transport van, Mrs. Chen from down the street approached me cautiously. Officer Thompson? Chief Thompson, I wanted to thank you. I was so scared of them. I put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You don't need to be scared anymore, Mrs. Chen, and you're getting back every penny they stole from you. Over the next 2 weeks, our investigation expanded beyond Nancy's fake HOA. We discovered she was connected to a real estate fraud ring that had been operating in 12 different neighborhoods across 3 counties. The investment company had been buying foreclosed properties for pennies on the dollar, not knowing they were purchasing homes that had been illegally seized through Nancy's scam. In total, we made 43 arrests, recovered over $2.3 million in fraudulent payments, and returned dozens of homes to their rightful owners. Nancy, faced with enough evidence to put her away for decades, agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. The fake compliance officers turned out to be small-time criminals. Nancy had hired from a temp agency, of all places. They thought they were working for a legitimate property management company. Most of them had no idea they were participating in a fraud scheme. But the best part came 3 weeks later. Was sitting on my porch, finally able to enjoy my own property in peace when a car pulled up. A man in a suit stepped out, carrying an official-looking envelope. Mr. Thompson? I'm from the Maple Valley Homeowners Association. The real one. I raised an eyebrow. There's a real HOA, he smiled. 3 neighborhoods over. We've been hearing about what happened here, and we wanted to personally apologize for any confusion Nancy Peterson might have caused by using similar language in her scam. He handed me the envelope. We'd also like to offer you an honorary position on our board. Apparently, having a police chief in the neighborhood tends to cut down on crime. I opened the envelope and started laughing. Inside was a genuine, legally filed homeowners association membership application, completely optional, with reasonable dues and actual community benefits. You know what? I said, signing the paper. I think I'd like that. Nancy Peterson is currently serving 8 years in state prison. Her fake HOA has been officially disbanded, and Maple Street is back to being the quiet, peaceful neighborhood I thought I was buying into. But here's the kicker. Last week, I got a letter from Nancy in prison. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to write a character reference for her parole hearing. I wrote back with just 2 words, not happening. Because sometimes, karma needs a little help from your friendly neighborhood police chief. And that, folks, is why you should always do your homework before messing with your neighbors. You never know who might be living next door. Remember to like and subscribe for more wild HOA stories. And drop a comment below if you've ever dealt with a fake homeowners association. Trust me, you're not alone.